Welcome into episode 200, 2 centuries down with the real _G Warner on Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, wherever you're doing this. Just put an ice pack on my arm. We'll see how this goes. Doing a podcast live while my left arm is completely numb. But we're doing this. This is a midweek, last week of the season, going through a little bit different type of slate. We will have another episode number 201 before the weekend, going through the big matches that will decide some relegation in France, also in Spain and in Italy, of course. But we're starting with midweek matches. We have a big one in a Manchester derby in the FA Cup final. We have a DFB Pokal. We have a relegation playoff in Germany between Stuttgart and one of the biggest clubs in Germany, Hamburger SV, or Hamburg, from northern Germany, who've been stuck in the Schweizer League, the second Bundesliga, for a while. And there's one other that I'm potentially forgetting, hopefully. And of course, the Europa League, which we'll start with, which is tomorrow, actually. So this is late night, recording Tuesday night in Dallas, Texas. I will have an ultimate best bet as part of the end of the show. No pregame.com promo code right now, but I do want to mention my Patreon. We'll shout out some of the subscribers and patrons later in the show. Thank you, of course, to all of you for your support, but especially if you're a pregame.com subscriber, you get everything you could want from there, all in one easy to go single place at a much more affordable price. Would highly recommend checking out. You get all my leans each night, also throughout the day, what I'm putting in, what I'm placing, what I'm changing my mind on, all those sort of things. So I highly recommend checking that out. Patreon.com/the_real_G Warner. All lines quoted in this podcast are courtesy of betonline.ag, my favorite place to get my bets down early. Reduced use is offered on almost every game you want to bet right up until game time. Please follow the link found in the podcast description to fund your account and use the promo code GW50 to receive a 50% match bonus up to $1,000. So as I said, I'm going to go in chronological order. So we'll start in the Europa League. We have a Wednesday match in some faraway land. It's a neutral field. I guess I can tell you exactly where it is. I don't expect to be an advantage for either Sevilla nor Roma. It is at the Puskás Arena, I believe, in Budapest. Budapest. There we go. And we have Sevilla against Roma. Two clubs that have kind of had different seasons, to say the least. Roma, both of these clubs getting here is great news for them. The Champions League's on the line. Is a big deal for them financially. I feel like Sevilla they've had three managers, where Roma have had one. Sevilla were fighting relegation for a lot of the season in Spain until a big run of results, really since Jose Luis Mendilibar came in, who seems like he's kind of out of his water, or he's swimming in the deep end. At Sevilla, had always been managing Basque clubs in the north of Spain, and usually low budget ones that were fighting relegation. And usually getting relegated. That's why he wasn't working there anymore. Now he got a big job at Sevilla after Jorge Sampaoli didn't work out, and Julian Lopetegui really shouldn't have continued and started the year at Sevilla, but his contract was running and they didn't get rid of him, so he stayed. He's moved on to greener pastures, and I think it's a better spot for him at Wolves in the Premier League, but we'll leave that to the side. Anyway, Sevilla, it's been up and down year. They actually lost a lot of their players. A bunch came back that were on loan deals. Speaking of Lucas Ocampos specifically, who's not playing at all for Ajax. And then he came back and was a big part of getting at least one victory on the road at Athletic Club in Bilbao. But it's been a really long year for Sevilla. They dominate this competition. They seem to always, I think they've won 6 Europa League championships or trophies already. Far more than anybody else. It's definitely not the most vaunted of the European competitions, but still pays pretty well, especially when you get to the final, win the final, and get a berth in the Champions League, because they certainly wouldn't get any sort of Europe based on their performance in La Liga. Roma, on the other side, they're fighting, trying to get into a Champions League position, but in Serie A, it doesn't look like that's likely. Had a big collapse this weekend. They were playing rotated side, as were Fiorentina, coming off the Coppa Italia midweek. But it was a pretty disappointing performance, especially as an under and Roma backer. Really, after a very early lead, Roma went into Mourinho style and played really defensive. did everything they could not to surrender a goal, and unfortunately gave up one and then gave up a second right afterwards, which kind of showed that it was a bunch of players that maybe weren't out there and certainly hadn't played in the previous round of this Europa League competition, which really all they did is go on the road to Leverkusen in Germany and just shut the door completely. So this is a little bit different as it's a one-off tie, neutral site, no road goals or no second legs or anything to worry about. It's who's going to win here. Sevilla are still an offensive team. They have been. I think they realize that they can't be a defensive one, and that's once they stopped trying to defend and started to try to outscore everybody. That actually helped them to get more points in La Liga, especially I think helpful because La Liga had such trouble scoring goals this year. Roma on the other side, they are more of an offensive side, or at least were coming into the year, have really kind of fallen into that Mourinho mold, his second season at the helm, and they played really defensively. They were great with a lead, and that's pretty much, I think, going to be a big battle. Like in every soccer match, especially betting, you want to have the first goal because that changes games. Goals change games. And what it'll do here, I think, is put Roma, if they take a lead, into a similar type of version of what we saw against Fiorentina this weekend, but more likely to have success like they did against Leverkusen in this competition with better defenders, better players, a lot more experience, et cetera, et cetera. Sevilla are going to try to score. They play Jose Luis Mendilibar, even with some of the worst sides in La Liga, still played a really high line. He's got more talent and more quality in the Sevilla side, not as much as we've seen in previous seasons, but they're going to play as as offensive as possible with a really high line defensively, which Roma will have some chances to go attack. I don't know that Paulo Dybala is expected to start. He hasn't started in a long time, so I can't imagine he would here. But Tammy Abraham certainly can run by a lot of Sevilla defenders. I'm not sure that Belotti has the speed necessarily, but I would think that he'd be second choice, though he has been playing a lot of minutes. So we'll see what happens with the lineups, but might as well get into this number now. So Sevilla currently a pick'em, so pretty split down the middle, but Sevilla are slightly more favored based on the juice right now. They're currently a minus 114 at the pick'em number, so you push if you go to extra time. But a win in regulation would win your bet. Over under is 2, heavily juiced the under. All of the juice is actually on the under right now. When I was tracking this number initially, I expected Roma to be a slight underdog. So this kind of fits with what I was expecting. I had Roma as or at least they were a smaller, they were a bigger underdog, let's put it this way, still on the pick'em number, but the juice was nearly getting odds on Roma. Minus 102 has climbed to minus 106. Sevilla have gone from minus 118 and fallen down to minus 114. So some money seems like it's hitting Roma. Maybe it's based on them rotating pretty significantly this weekend. Sevilla also played a day earlier than the rest of La Liga to try to get some extra rest for this matchup. Seemed to play a little bit more aggressively, I think, of a lineup than Roma did, because Roma, despite taking that lead, they were playing certainly a second choice side. So much more money on the line getting into Champions League this route, whereas trying to catch Milan, who they're bunch of points behind in Serie A with only a couple matches to go, was going to be really hard to do. So it seemed clear to me, and probably clear to odds makers, because Roma were a pretty big underdog. Of course, Jans are back. It is late night, so it makes a little more sense. But Roma were a pretty big underdog against Fiorentina, who were expected to rotate, I think, as well. And I think that was a little bit telling for the number, but of course, they took a lead early and just couldn't hold on late. But in terms of to lift the trophy, I have Sevilla minus 112, so a slightly smaller favorite if you consider going to extra time. This number hasn't really moved since I've been looking at it. Roma minus 108. So pretty close split down the middle. Unfortunately, as an underdog player, I generally look for sides that are going to potentially draw, and I'll win a bet here. Unfortunately, if you're backing a pick'em, you need to win regulation. A draw will push. So I think my biggest interest right now is in the under 2. It is very juiced at the moment, though, and that definitely limits my interest. Plus, there's not a lot of leeway in, unfortunately, in a neutral site matchup with only 2 as the total. So it might be one of those matches I don't really do much with. I can't imagine, especially after seeing the juice kind of pushing this number down. I feel like it's unlikely to hit 1 3/4. I feel like that'd be a big surprise to me, though it certainly has been happening in a fair amount of La Liga matches recently. I don't know really necessarily in other leagues, but I got to say, if it did hit 1 3/4, that makes me very tempted to play over, though. These are two teams, at least Roma would be a team I'd expect to play under. Of course, the odds are back. Anyway, sorry, bear with me. Hopefully that's the last bout of them or batch of them. But Sevilla, I mean, they're not a defensive side at all. So that also makes playing under two even more difficult to consider, stomach, all those sort of things. So it might be better for me to look the other way on that one. I would love to see if one of those teams moves to plus money to win basically to win the trophy. I think that would be interesting because I do feel like it's going to be a very close matchup, probably a really good one to watch. But I'm not sure there's a lot for me to bet in that one specifically in the Europa League, which is unfortunate because it's been a really great competition to me so far this year. Next, I'll move to the German Bundesliga, where you'll find this line on most sites, I think, because it is ultimately a match, a two-legged tie to get into the German Bundesliga's top division. The third from bottom, DFB Stuttgart, they are basically entered into this playoff against the third best team in the Schweizerliga, the Bundesliga 2. And it's two really, really big historic clubs in Germany. Really, whoever wins this, the Bundesliga is not losing out because they need these. Really, they need both of these teams in the top division to really grow the German soccer sport as much as they possibly could on a national or international level. But I guess at least they'll get one of them here. And currently Stuttgart, the Bundesliga third from bottom, so 16th placed during the regular season, one that was getting a fair amount of respect from odds makers towards the end of the stretch. Were favored on the road a fair amount, but just couldn't get enough points to get out of the bottom area, I guess. They didn't get automatically relegated like Schalke, 04 and Hertha Berlin did, but still are going to have to fight for their lives, and that's going to be a big challenge for them. They welcome Hamburg SV, HSV, who are a big club, had a huge crowd support on the road at Sandhausen, one of the worst teams in the Schweizerliga, where they needed to outpoint Heidenheim in order to, I guess, reverse a point deficit in order to avoid this match and get promoted automatically. They could not do so, and so here they are. Stuttgart are the host. They're currently a 3/4 goal favorite right now, with almost all with a little bit more of the juice, -115 to -105. Over under is 3. Juice pretty heavily to the under. And I'm interested in Hamburg because they were in this matchup last year, faced Hertha Berlin. I also feel like it's food for thought for next year. Look for teams that don't survive or that do survive, relegation playoffs, and then try to bet against them, or maybe look to them to go down as Hertha did this season. Anyway, we have a 3/4 goal spread, which is kind of big to me. Hamburg last year against Hertha Berlin, they were only a 1/4 goal underdog on the road in this first leg. The Bundesliga side hosts, and then the Schweizerliga side is hosting the second leg. So really, to me, this is a big setup and a big opportunity for the Schweizerliga lower league team to really try to hold their own on the road and then get the second leg at home and really do everything they can. If Hamburg get a draw here on this first leg, they don't have a 2 advanced number, unfortunately, or like to win promotion number. But if Hamburg get a draw here or somehow win on the road at Stuttgart, it'd put them in a great position to go up and be promoted. Didn't work so well last year, as they did win 1-0 on the road at Hertha and then lost 2-0 at home. And ended up being, I guess, stuck in the Schweizerliga again for another year. But also a good sign when you get to the playoff 2 years in a row. That means finishing in third place. They clearly were one of the best teams in the Schweizerliga, have a little bit more of a budget than most clubs, being a big city club from the north of Germany. And I think they're going to put some pressure on Stuttgart. So Hamburg, what I've watched of them, not a lot this season, but same manager still around from last season, and they like to play out of the back. They like to control the ball. And what I expect to happen is that they'll probably be in a pretty defensive mindset. Stuttgart have way more talent, a much bigger budget, but certainly aren't in a perfect situation and are definitely threatened here. And every second they don't go ahead, I feel like the crowd at the Stuttgart Mercedes-Benz Arena get even more concerned, especially it's a little bit weird of a scenario because they're doing construction like during the season this year. So they don't have the same type of crowd effect or impact like I think they would normally hope they have. That helps the road team. A lot of things do. Nerves help the road team. I feel like it's going to be hard for Stuttgart, who really weren't able to clinch and kind of pull themselves out of this relegation spat for what felt like the entire season. It's good that they didn't get automatically relegated, of course, but they've more talent than, and they should be above where they are right now. And I think what we've seen from Stuttgart this year is that Girassi has been pretty good as a striker for them. They really missed Sasa Kalajic, who ended up leaving for Wolves, tearing his ACL, I think, and missing the whole season. But they didn't really have much of a striker. Their real talent is on the wings and trying to run by teams. But I don't expect Hamburg to give those type of angles and that space to Stuttgart. What I expect them to do is really want to play out of the back, Hamburg do themselves. Stuttgart will probably pressure that and try to turn that into goals and turnovers that lead to goals themselves. But that's a really tough way to create offense. So I think it's ultimately going to be Stuttgart trying to cross balls in the box. Hamburg, or I think one of the leaders in crosses into the box themselves in the Schweizer Liga. And that's not really a very high expected goals, or doesn't really generate a lot of good goal scoring opportunities. There is a very big forward for Hamburg and Robert Glatzel, who was, I think, playing for Mainz a couple seasons ago in the Bundesliga. He's been at Hamburg at least 2 years now. He's there last year for sure. Stuttgart have big center backs, but that's going to be a challenge for them. And I think there's a lot, honestly, clearly there's a lot riding a line, because any of these teams can get relegated or essentially get one. I guess the Bundesliga side, Stuttgart would get relegated. Hamburg would be promoted. There's a ton of money on the line based on being in the Bundesliga versus the Schweizer Liga, with all the revenue sharing, all that sort of stuff, plus being in that top rate area. The Oberhausen is very important to these clubs. And I think there's going to be a lot on the line here. I expect it to be a really physical game, and it's going to be very conservative, especially in a first leg when you really don't want to get knocked out of the tie so early. So my biggest interest, especially, I don't have a too advanced type of number here, or the team to get through. But I do think that Hamburg can be a really big thorn in the side of Stuttgart, who I just haven't trusted to beat really anybody at this point. So I'm very interested in an under 3 right now. Stuttgart certainly aren't designed to be a great defensive side, but I don't think they're going to get a ton of opportunities against to really use their pace and use their talent. So I think it's going to be a really tough setup for Stuttgart. I think as a 3/4 goal favorite, that seems pretty large. They have a little bit more of the juice right now, so I'm waiting to see if it's at +1, because I think I'd be interested in Hamburg there as well. But still, I think more interested in under 3, and that will be what I'm looking for most on Thursday. It's a Thursday match, Thursday afternoon here in the United States. Next, I'll go to the FA Cup, and this is a Manchester derby. Usually I start off with English, or English matches, but ultimately this is a Saturday match. I want to get through Wednesday and Thursday first, in case any of you want to listen to this in installments. I don't blame you. I think it'll be worth it. Here we go. Manchester City, of course, with the Champions League on their mind coming up next. Still trying to win the treble, as it's been called, where they won the Premier League. They still have the FA Cup, and then also the Champions League next Saturday. Potentially some look ahead to that, but I feel like that probably won't happen, especially against their biggest rival in their same city at Wembley Stadium in London. So it's another neutral field type of event. And I think Manchester United, they are really happy with how their season has gone. They made Champions League. They of course didn't win the league, but I don't think that was their expectation, or an aspiration was probably on their list, but probably wasn't realistic to them. And so they're pretty happy with it. They'd love to spoil the treble for sure. I think that we'll see. Really, I'm curious about what Manchester United's defense will look like. Certainly a lineup and a starting lineup I'd love to see, just to see who they're playing at center back. I would expect Rafael Varane is there. I would honestly want to see Lindelof instead of Harry Maguire, who just makes so many mistakes and just looks like someone that needs to leave and go to a lower team in the Premier League, is probably the best chance of where he would go. So get to the number here. Manchester United currently 1.25 goal underdog in a neutral site to Manchester City. Manchester City at 1.25 goal favorite. Also, the over under is 3, with all the juice to the under. I'm not really expecting a blowout here. I got to say, Manchester United, they have for years wanted to play a counterattacking brand of football. They're going to have that ability here. They're going to try to use the pace of Marcus Rashford to really try to sprint down the pitch as fast as he possibly can. Manchester City, they're so used to having the ball and controlling it and really toying with the opponents. They're pretty good at taking the the fouls that are clearly the cynical fouls to stop counterattacks, they somehow get away. Bernardo Silva is like the king of getting away with red cards that don't even get called for yellows. And will then pick up a yellow later in the match and should have been sent off, but then scores a goal to beat you. I felt that wrath, unfortunately, a bunch of times, but they're going to do their best to try to push down the pitch, try to really push Manchester United all into their 18-yard box, find a goal, and then do their best to keep it there, essentially. On the other side, Manchester United, they're going to try to get out as much as possible, try to get as much air in their lungs, because defending for 90 minutes is really just not something that's doable, even from the best some of the best and most expensive soccer players in the world. I think in terms of where this match goes, at Wembley should be a pretty even split in fans, so I don't expect there to be an advantage to either side. Maybe neutrals rooting for Manchester United, though it's probably a hard thing to say, because I don't think anyone really, unless you're a Manchester United or City fan, I don't think either of you would. I don't think you're rooting for either of these clubs necessarily. But I do also feel like Manchester United, when they're trying to use their counterattack, I feel like the under 3 is also interesting to me, especially because I feel like they know that they're going to try their best to win this match 1-0. It's going to be hard for them to get in a scoring match to Man City, because they just don't have that ability. They don't have a center forward that can score goals like Erling Haaland can. And he should be pretty well rested for this matchup, but I don't know necessarily that changes too much. Great job for City keeping him healthy this season, especially for how many matches they've been playing. But I got to say, I'm pretty interested in both Manchester United as a side, getting that 1.25 plus the under 3. I feel like both they're correlated. Of course, a high scoring match is never good for an underdog. And of course, it's never good for an under either. I think I'm not in love with fading Man City, I got to say, but I've had pretty good success with it, especially, I mean, winning last weekend on Brentford was a nice close to the season. Brentford were great to me, and I kind of wish they were the type of team in this competition, because they would have been a huge underdog, I would suspect. But I think Manchester United clearly have talent. They can hang with Man City. They haven't really had a great run against Man City over the years, but I expect this to be a little bit different in a trophy on the line, a cup final, that they're going to play as conservatively as possible, which certainly plays in Man City's hand and probably makes it even that much more difficult for anyone to score goals on Man City if you're going to try to batten down the hatches and try to defend. But Manchester United have great pace on the wings. I don't think that Antony will be available. I think he's probably done for the season. But seeing Marcus Rashford sprinting against a backline for Man City, trying to evade and dodge the tackles and potentially finding a goal in the counterattack, that seems to me the best way for Manchester United to win this matchup. I think of my biggest interest, I'll go under 3. But also to lift the trophy numbers, we have Manchester City currently a minus 380 favorite to go through. So that's a pretty expensive $380 to win 100. Manchester United a 3-1 underdog, so $100 will win you 300. I mean, there's a chance that Manchester United can win this matchup. We've seen crazy things happen in cup finals, especially to Manchester City. Generally, it's the Champions League that they struggle the most to win. But I guess I'm interested in the underdog and the under, but I don't think if you're considering playing the under, I would not lose the 3. I would honestly pay the juice that would be required to make sure you get a flat 3, especially because it's about to be the end of the season. Yes, it's going to make it much harder to be profitable in the long term, but I do think a +3 is a big important point, so that you'd push on a 2-1 final as opposed to losing with an under 2 3/4. Next, I'll move, and of course, I'll summarize this all at the end. Got a Patreon shout out coming up, so stick around for that as well. I'll move to, if I could find it, the German DFB Pokal. And I think this is the last thing I'm going to cover on this episode. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yes, so we've gone through the FA Cup. Here we're going to do the DFB Pokal. We got the first leg of the Relegation playoff, or just relegation as they call it in Germany, I guess. And then the Europa League. So Europa Conference League's coming next week, as well as Champions League. Plus, we got the weekend episode will go through the remaining top 5 European leagues in Spain, Italy, and France. But for the DFB Pokal, we have RB Leipzig, and I guess this is in Berlin, so not hosting. This is a neutral site as well, against Eintracht Frankfurt, who have had a really poor year. Their manager is about to leave. It's lame duck, but certainly will be going all out for a cup trophy, just like he won the Europa League last year to get a Champions League berth, Eintracht Frankfurt, and that might have been a big reason for why they weren't able to qualify for a European competition this season. At least I don't think they did. Anyway, this is their chance to get into the Europa League, which would be huge for them. But they've got a really tough competition against Leipzig, who essentially looked like they had given the Meisterschale, the DFB, the Bundesliga championship to Dortmund, but with a win on the road at Bayern Munchen in the second to last match day, the penultimate match day 33. But ultimately, it was not enough. Spieltag 33. And that victory, because Dortmund unfortunately lost at home to Mainz, but who cares? It's their own fault. Anyway, for this matchup, Leipzig are currently a 3/4 goal favorite. With a little bit more of the juice. Over under is also 3, pretty juicy the under. This is a matchup where Leipzig are going to try to control the middle of the pitch. That's what they do. They've got really great depth. They've got a lot of great scorers. A bunch are leaving this summer, but I think this trophy matters a lot to them. They're trying to defend their championship from last year, which was an amazing comeback, especially down a man and down a goal, to then win in extra time and penalties. But I'm not sure. They're probably gonna do their best not to be in that situation again this year. It's probably unlikely that situation would repeat itself. Eintracht Frankfurt, on the other hand, are a counterattacking side that have, I think, really I think playing those extra matches in Champions League, especially getting through and ultimately being eliminated by Napoli, but getting there and playing those matches really kind of zapped their energy, legs, and really tested some depth that I don't think they really had enough of. Randall Colomani got suspended after getting a red card early stages of that first knockout round, first leg against Napoli. And then Lindstrom, one of their better attackers, has been hurt for a lot of the season. Daiki Kamada, he was essentially moving on to another club and announced that pretty early on in the season, and really wasn't playing a ton, / it seemed like his mind was elsewhere. And that seemed to really take Eintracht Frankfurt from a side that looked like they could have been one of the best in the Bundesliga to then really struggling to even hang around in those playoff spots towards the end. I think I'm just making sure. So yeah, Eintracht Frankfurt, they finished 7th place, tied with Leverkusen on points, but worse goal differentials. So I think this is how clearly they would be in the, I guess they might get a bid into the Europa Conference League, even losing, because RB Leipzig would have already using one of the spots into the Champions League. But I don't want to diagnose that because I can't make sure of it live on a podcast. But anyway, this is a big shot for them to get into much more financially driven competition like the Europa League. And I think it would essentially save a season that seems like it had gone awry for Eintracht Frankfurt. They're a 3/4 goal underdog. I don't know necessarily. I mean, I like the setup because they want to counterattack. They're going to sit back. They're going to try to defend their best. And that's a huge thing to do against Leipzig, who are going to try to outscore you. And that's kind of what Leipzig want. I do trust the Leipzig defense, though, with a lead to try to keep Eintracht Frankfurt out. I don't necessarily think they'll be conservative. They'll certainly be looking for counterattacks to try to get a 1-0 lead that turned it to 2-0, or a 1-goal lead to try to make it 2. But I don't expect them to take a ton of chances in that way. They'll play open the whole way, like Bayern Munchen seem to do. So I feel like their leads probably, I think, will lead to an under more than necessarily a lot of other bigger clubs in the Bundesliga, like Dortmund and Bayern Munchen, who just don't really stop attacking. I think Leipzig will be a lot more conservative, just the way their game plan goes, which is to control in the middle of the pitch and really to spring counterattacks as quickly as possible as soon as you have an opportunity. Eintracht Frankfurt are going to be sitting pretty deep in this matchup. I give them less of a chance to cover the spread. I think it's one of another similar situation where I want to get a +1 on them, just like I was thinking about with Hamburg SV. I don't see necessarily that happening just yet. I feel like the juice will have to move considerably in the direction it has been moving, but it hasn't moved enough just yet to get there or make it even look like it's threatening to move to +1, because I think that's a number that people don't want to give away, because that will mean a lot of times there's a push, and books don't like to push things, especially on big kind of end of year matches that there aren't really a lot more of opportunities to kind of make your handle and keep it. I think in terms of the over-under, I do like under 3. I think that all of these cup matches, you probably have heard this a bunch of times already on this episode, but cup matches play tight, and these are two sides that want to win this competition. One side is going to play defensively. I do like their defense, and I think that they can cause Leipzig problems by forcing Leipzig to have to create and really kind of carry the burden the whole match. Frankfurt are going to try their best to spring counterattacks and get Rondo Colomwani in space. But he hasn't really been as effective towards the end of the season. I think he kind of wore down a little bit, and the physicality of the Bundesliga was a lot more impactful, though. Then again, Liga in France is still very, very physical. So I think my biggest interest is in the under 3. I'll also go through the lift the trophy odds. Leipzig currently minus 265 favorite to get through. So $265 will win you 100. Eintracht Frankfurt on the other side are plus 205, so a little more than 2 to 1. $100 will win you 205. I don't really think that Frankfurt have a shot to win here, just based on how poorly they've played through the second half of the season. Of course, crazy things can happen. I feel like in last year's competition, Freiburg were playing a lot better and were in a good position to really take on Leipzig, and really should have done the deed and won the Europa League or bid by winning the DFB Pokal trophy last season, but ultimately kind of fell apart towards the end, and then certainly did in penalty kicks. I don't think, let me just check. I don't think I have where this number was previously. Actually, I do. I had it at Leipzig minus 280. So currently it's down to 265. So it's fallen down a little bit. Not a huge move, but does show that I guess there's some money that's interested in the underdog so far, especially showing up, dropping this number. Frankfurt were as high as 220 when I saw it, so down to 205. So that's a drop of nearly 7%. So some money has come in, to say the least, since I guess I tracked this on the 27th was the last time I looked at this. So a few days ago, but that's a good sign, because usually underdog money waits to the end. We don't have that necessarily here, so maybe we'll see that number kind of dropping a little bit. I still think I need a +1 to get involved on Frankfurt on the side, as I really want to see that push on +1 if they do lose in regulation by a single goal. But I do think under 3 is still very interesting. So I think that covers the 4 matches in all, I guess, top to bottom for this week. There's certainly another episode coming through with the league stuff for Serie A, Ligue 1, and La Liga in Spain. I do have a shout out to patrons that I want to give right now, and then ultimately we'll do the ultimate best bet at the end of the show. So want to thank newest subscriber Alex for coming in. I think just joined today in the wee hours. Thank you so much for the support. Also, welcome Bryce Buckmaster into the 3-month club. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate you sticking with me as long as it's been. It's been a little bit of a touch and go scenario, a little bit of a growing pain, certainly getting everything in a position where everyone knows what I'm doing. Everyone's getting communicated the way they want it to be. I think we're doing a lot better now. And of course, any sort of feedback, interests, or anything like that, please pass that along. Before we get into ultimate best bet, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. It's really huge to get me up there in the search, I guess, when people are looking for podcasts. If you are on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, and that would be huge as well. Plus, leave a 5-star review, something nice, something mean. I'll read it if I see it before I record the next podcast coming up. And I think it's probably time to get into the ultimate best bet. So, hi, I'm the real_G Warner on Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. This is Betting the Pitch number 200, celebratory episode. And we're going to go through the ultimate best bet portion of the show, picking out my favorite best bets from the very many different leagues we covered on this episode. So in the Europa League final on Wednesday, May 31st, I like the Roma under 2. In Germany, in the first leg of the Relegation playoff, I like Hamburg under 3 goals. It's a total on that match. In the FA Cup on Saturday, I like Manchester United under 3 goals. And in the DFB Pokal, also on Saturday, I also like that under 3. For my best bet, an ultimate best bet for this episode, I'm going to go with the Hamburg under 3 goals. First leg of a relegation playoff, one Bundesliga side against a second Bundesliga side. Trying to make sure that they get to the top division next season. The Oberhausen, it's going to be really hard to do it. I don't see a lot of offense. I think it's going to be very, very tight. And I like Hamburg to keep it really, really close. So you'll see under 3 goals in a match against Stuttgart. And that'll do it for this episode of Betting Pitch number 200. Thanks for coming in. All the support all season has been a long year, especially the World Cup coming in the middle of the year. I look forward to international stuff this summer, but stick around. We still got a bunch of episodes left. We'll come back to you probably Thursday night and try to break everything down, get as prepared as possible for what should be the last big weekend of the soccer season, at least with a full slate of matches being played and at least 3 of the top 5 European leagues. Again, thanks for joining. Thanks for the support. Check out patreon.com/thereal_GWarner, twitter.com/thereal_GWarner. Slide in the DMs. I'll answer them wherever I see them as soon as I do. Thanks for the support, and I love you all. We will talk to you on Thursday. Of course, MLB podcast coming out with Scott Seidenberg Thursday night, so stick around, look around for that. Of course, plenty of stuff going on at pregame.com, and we will talk about that on the next episode. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.